great pleasure to introduce Dr. Ketevi Assaggaman, who will talk to us about the African Strategy for Fundamental Physics and Applications launch. And while he is preparing to share his screen, I just want to emphasize that Dr. Assaggaman has led the African School on Fundamental Physics, and more recently, that version of the, alongside of the school, the African Conference on Fundamental Physics. For many years, I believe the school dates back to, I believe, 2010, and every 2 years the school has run. And now this is a new endeavor called the African Strategy for Fundamental Physics and Applications. And we are honored, both the African Physical Society and the African Light Source, that the launch will be here at this virtual workshop. So I will pass the microphone to Dr. Assaggaman.
Thanks, Tabitha, for the introduction. So I am Ketevi Assaggaman. I am originally from Togo. I am currently at Brookhaven National Laboratory. I am a physicist, experimental physicist, doing particle physics research. So today I will talk to you about a new project that we are about to start. We are starting the African Strategy for Fundamental and Applied Physics. Here are my colleagues from the steering committee. We have Professor Cornell, Simon Cornell, who just spoke about the African light source. We have Professor Farida Fassi from Mohammed V University in Rabat, Morocco. Professor Shaban Khalil from the Center for Fundamental Physics, Zewal City in Egypt. And Dr. Ferouz Malek from CNRS and Grenoble University in France. You can see more detail about this African strategy on the website. There's more information there. When you have some time, please go and browse. All right, so the outline of what I am going to say is as follows. I will tell you briefly about the motivation for this strategy and what are the expectations and the organization and so forth. And I will also tell you about how you can get involved. So this is not you know, an effort of some people and then you can be on the side, but we are launching these things so that we want your involvement, your active participation. So that's exactly the point. We also briefly talk about the timeline and the physics group and subgroup and the endorsement and support and current status and our international advisory committee and the conveners. So the African strategy is not anything new. Around the world, there has been already many physics strategies that have been going on. In June 2020, there was an update of the European Strategy for Particle Physics that was released. So if you take a look at that, you have this statement in there. The European Strategy for Particle Physics is the cornerstone of Europe's decision-making process for the long-term future of the field. Mandated by the European Council, it is formed through a broad consultation of grassroots particle physics community. It actively solicits the opinion of physicists around the world, and it is developed in close coordination with similar processes in the US, excuse me, in the US and Japan, in order to ensure coordination between the regions, optimal use of resources globally. Now, this was actually a follow-up to previous two European strategies in 2006 and 2013. At the moment, the United States is preparing its own strategy, is known as SNOMAS 2021, with a final report expected by October 2021. I won't read, but it's similar philosophy. Latin America is also preparing its own strategy. It's called Latin American Strategy Forum for Research Infrastructures for High Energy, Cosmology, and Astrophysics. And the statement there is that they are developing a strategy to strengthen Latin American scientific collaborations and their impact. It is the first time they are doing it. They started in 2016. It is quite advanced now. In Europe also, there was the European Astroparticle Physics Strategy, which was released a couple of years ago. So you see that different regions of the world are getting the physics community together to try to define some sort of a roadmap, some direction, prioritizing resources, and putting all of these things into a report, which then they submit to their policymakers to help the policymakers plan how they want to support these resources and so forth. So that compelled us in Africa to come together and try to do something similar. And that was the reasons for us to start thinking about the African strategy for fundamental physics and applications. So we would like to develop a strategy to increase African education and research capabilities, improve collaborations, and inform international partners, sponsors, policymakers on the strategic directions likely to impact development in Africa. So it is us who should define what are the directions that are important for us, so that our international partners, when they want to partner with us, they know what we believe are the most important, what have priorities, because we have defined it. That is the objective here. So we want to engage African scientists and the international community in developing this strategy. So everybody, as physicists, needs to come together, express their voices, their opinion, and so forth, so that we can define what the strategy should look like. So it's a process that should take a few years, so it's not really indefinite. And at the end of that process, we release a report which will suggest the direction with actionable items for the next decade. And then that report will be submitted to the African policymakers, and then they have an information that, okay, this is what physicists, African physicists, in consultation with international partners, are thinking this is important for them. And then they will be able to act on it. And then the process could be repeated 7 to 10 years later. At that point, we will review what was done before, which actions were taken, which were not taken, how do we revise this strategy, given current information and so forth. I told you in Europe, they have done a third one, 2006, 2013, and then 2020. So that's the process. They have been reviewing it and updating it. And once we start, that's what we will be doing in 10 years or 7 years or however often we set out to be able to do it. So the general structure that we are thinking about is more or less the same thing as the other strategies of the world. We have a steering committee, I mentioned it to you, an advisory committee, and then we have to define the physics group that are of importance, and then the group conveners and so forth. At that point, we want to solicit input from the community at large in forms of letters of intent, which would describe what you think should be the physics priorities for Africa, white papers, which will be a bit more detailed than compared to the letters of intent, where you have done a bit more studies to demonstrate why you think this direction is most important for Africa. So all of those ideas should be discussed in the relevant groups or subgroups. And then we will be getting feedback from the International Advisory Committee in order to push the process further. That requires some logistics in terms of having websites and having some pages for working groups, repositories, mailing lists, discussion forums, meeting agendas, maybe workshops. All of these things are under development right now. So this is how more or less everything is connected. The steering committee will be the go-between, the one driving the efforts, communicating with the International Advisory Committee and communicating with the working group making sure that everything is evolving according to plan, and will be responsible for drafting the final report. And the International Advisory Committee will be reviewing the progress, making sure that we are on track, and will be advising us on the scope, and also will be engaging with the international committees and communities and policymakers. And also in the end, they will review the final, review and endorse the final report. Then the group conveners will be the people who will be coordinating the efforts at the group level. So that will be defined according to major physics directions. And then there will be some topics that are cross-cutting. That means they don't necessarily fall within one physics group, but they impact many different physics groups. For example, when we talk about physics education, for instance, yeah. So if you are in astrophysics, you have an issue to educate people about that. If you are in medical physics, you also have an issue about physics education. So that is cross-cutting. Yeah. So we need people who will be liaisons among the groups to make sure that there is no hole in our strategy. Everything is well covered, and that the groups know what is going on in the other groups. And then, so like I said, the timeline will be in a few years, we should stop. So how can you get involved? Well, you can get involved by nominating subgroup conveners. We will call for nomination at some points and these liaisons. You may volunteer yourself to be a subgroup convener. You may submit a letter of intent. You may submit white papers to tell us what you think is the most important direction that we should take in this particular field that will be relevant for Africa. And you should participate in drafting or developing these white papers. Also participate in the meetings that will be organized by the conveners, physics group conveners or subgroup conveners, and offer constructive opinions and your expertise. So we want your active participation in the process, because it's a grassroots process by physicists themselves. Yeah, and also we would like to state that you know, we should encourage, or you should encourage, institutional credit for those who are working in the strategy, because it is really important for, you know, Africa as a whole. Like people who are in leadership role as conveners or liaisons, those should be recognized by the institutes that they have been called to do this job, and therefore they are getting credit for it. If you are working on the white paper, that should be of a publishable quality, and we encourage you to publish that in a peer-reviewed journal. And then your findings in your white paper, which may be or may have been published, those findings will be reviewed in the group and then will be referenced in the strategy report. So your work in this strategy will receive proper recognition at your institute internationally, and should result in a paper and serve the interests of the African strategy. So it's not a wasted effort. You get a paper out of it, you get the recognition, and you serve the interests of the strategy. So here is the timeline. We are just about to start. If everything goes well, we should have that final report in October, December 2022. But we will revise this timeline according to progress. It may need to be adjusted. We will at some point put a deadline to receive the LOIs and the white papers, and as we make progress. Yeah, so here's the physics group that we have identified so far. I think there are 10 of them here. We are expanding this to add additional groups. So these are the ones that are mentioned here. So you should be able to find your group here, that you are also a part of this strategy. So come and join us. Let's get this work done. And we also have community engagement, which has topics like physics education, knowledge transfer, entrepreneurship, physics communication, outreach, stakeholder relations, government policies, and so on. Things like that that are not necessarily physics, but have a serious impact on physics. So those we have under community engagement. So we are thinking of having working group according to these major physics groups that we have here, and 3 to 4 co-conveners per group, depending on the group. We are in the process of selecting the group conveners. And in this process, it is serious that we have gender balance. And we will also seek additional, divide the groups into subgroups appropriately. So in terms of endorsement, we are developing this strategy under the umbrella of the African Physical Society. Professor Wage just mentioned that. So you go to the African Physical Society website, you'll see a link over there, and we will be reporting progress at meetings organized by the African Physical Society. And the society will endorse the final report. We also have support already from international organizations like the International Union for Pure and Applied Physics. And we have support from the CERN Director General. We are in the process of engaging the African Academy of Sciences in order to be able to reach the African Union. We have support from the members of the International Advisory Committee. The current status is that we have a website under development. We are setting up the logistics. We had the first meeting with the group conveners and also with the advisory committee. We receive a lot of feedback and suggestions. We are in the process of implementing those. And we will be engaging the conveners in the definition of the subgroup for each group. That process will start in the next week or so. And then there are some invitations that we need to follow up on, and we'll pursue our engagement with the African Academy of Sciences with the aim to reach the African Union. And then there are the additional physics group that I mentioned on page 8. We will seek the group conveners for those physics group. And tentatively, before the end of this year, we aim to have another meeting with our International Advisory Committee and also the conveners. For the rest, we'll just follow the timeline that we described already. So here are the names of the people that we have identified. So if you stare at it a little bit, you see that these are people of international standing, and they come from Africa, Europe, the Americas, and Asia. And they have a broad expertise in their fields. And their job is to really inform how this strategy should develop so that we do a good job in the end. So in terms of the conveners, like I said, we have 3 or 4 per group. Here are some of the people that we have identified who have accepted for each of the group. And you have particle physics there, you have nuclear physics, you have accelerators, medical physics, light sources, then you have instrumentation and detectors, astrophysics and cosmology, computing, and then you have the community engagement. Yeah, and like I said, there are the other physics group that we have, and we haven't yet advanced in finding the conveners, but that process is starting. So if you don't see your field in these 3 lists here, you mustn't be worried. The list that you should be seeing is on this page. If there are other fields of physics that you think are important that are not mentioned here, then come and tell us. But these are the major fields. Like I said, we will be defining their subgroups. So we would like your involvement in this process. You have our email there. Let us know your comments and how you want to help. And let us get this important work of the strategy off the ground. This is the inaugural one. If we succeed with this, then we'll establish a way forward. Older generation, younger people will come in and will do the updated version 10 years later, and other people will carry on. Just like it's being done in Europe. Like I mentioned, they started in 2006, and 2010, they were doing the 3rd version. The US did one in 2013, and now they are doing a second one in 2020. Latin America is starting their version. Their first one right now is fairly advanced and is certainly a success. So we can also succeed in Africa. I will stop there.
Okay, well, we thank you so very much for this presentation, Dr. Assaggaman. And in the interest of time, I will limit the Q&A behind your presentation. I think that everyone feels the importance and the gravity of the pulling together this strategy for fundamental and applied physics. And what I want to do is point you to the chat. The chat is really blowing up. So many people are engaged in this topic and asking you to add topical areas such as condensed matter physics, such as earth physics and agricultural physics, and such as biophysics, which is, they say, broad, Dr. Kruger says, is broader than medical physics. So you will have many, many ideas in the chat. With that, we are running behind by about 3 minutes. If there is a burning question, please go ahead and unmute yourself and ask. And if not, we will begin to transition to the next presenter.